At 58, Vin Diesel's life has taken an unexpected turn, and the truth behind it will leave you speechless. Known for his iconic roles in Fast and Furious, Vin has always been the picture of strength and determination. But now, the beloved star is facing a heartbreaking reality that no one saw coming. This emotional revelation will make you pause and reflect on the man behind the action. Prepare yourself. This is a story that will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Vin Diesel's journey to stardom began in the most humble of places. Born Mark Sinclair on July 18, 1967, in Alamo County, California, his early years were shaped by hardship and a sense of longing. His father was absent from his life, and his mother, Dolores Charlene Vincent, raised him as a single parent in a rough neighborhood. She was a dreamer, an astrologer, and an actress. But the reality of raising two kids in a cramped apartment in New York City was far from glamorous. Vin's childhood home was filled with the rawness of poverty. The family lived in West Beth Artists Housing, a building known for its cheap rent but poor conditions. The walls were cracked, the lights flickered constantly, and the elevators often broke down. In a place where hope was in short supply, it was imagination that kept them going. Vin later recalled that his mother would tell stories about the stars, hoping to distract her children from the hunger they sometimes felt. While the situation was far from ideal, it was filled with a sense of creativity. His stepfather, Irving H. Vincent, a black theater teacher from Harlem, was a patient and kind man who would become the only father figure Vin would ever know. Despite the struggles, the family found solace in their dreams, even if they were hard to reach. Vin was raised in an environment where survival was the priority, and dreams were a way to escape the harsh reality of their lives. His stepfather, who taught acting to kids who couldn't afford lessons, gave Vin a glimpse into a world beyond their tough neighborhood. The acting classes, the stories his mother told, and the support of his family became his lifeline. Though they didn't have much in terms of material wealth, they had something even more powerful: the ability to dream, to imagine, and to aspire for something better. Growing up, Vin was a quiet child, but there was a fire inside him that he couldn't always explain. He didn't have the luxury of a father figure attending school plays or offering the kind of support that other kids had. Instead, he wrestled with the questions that haunted him, the uncertainty of who he really was. Racial identity was something Vin struggled with from a young age. He later described it as Schrodinger's cat. He was neither one thing nor the other, and it wasn't until someone labeled him that he even knew who he was supposed to be. By the time Vin was 7, his life took a pivotal turn. Along with a group of friends, he broke into a small theater in Greenwich Village, expecting to face the usual consequences, a scolding or a call to the police. But instead, they were met by Crystal Field, the theater's director, who didn't yell or call the authorities. Instead, she handed them scripts and told them to come back the next day to earn $20.00 by performing. That moment changed everything for Vin. Acting, something he had never considered before, became a lifeline. It was an outlet for all the anger, confusion, and loneliness he had felt. Acting gave him a sense of control in a chaotic world, and from that point on, he never looked back. In the face of hardship, Vin found purpose. Acting wasn't just a hobby, it was survival. It gave him the language to express everything he couldn't say, the outlet for emotions that had no other release. And that small theater in Greenwich Village became the spark that ignited his passion. He realized that this wasn't just an escape, it was his path to something greater. He had found his calling, and it was one that would eventually lead him to Hollywood. But first, he had to survive the streets and find a way to prove his worth. Vin Diesel's humble beginnings weren't just about poverty or hardship, they were about resilience. They were about a young boy who, despite being rejected by his father and struggling to find his place in a world that didn't seem to care, found strength in the most unexpected places. From broken apartments and flickering streetlights to a future full of possibility, Vin's story was one of survival, creativity, and dreams that refused to die, no matter how hard the world tried to push them down. Vin Diesel's journey into Hollywood wasn't an easy one. In fact, it was anything but the smooth path most people imagine when they think of someone rising to stardom. He wasn't born into privilege or given a golden ticket into the entertainment world. Instead, Vin had to fight every step of the way, navigating rejection and uncertainty, carving out his own path when the doors of opportunity seemed to be closed. Growing up, Vin always had a passion for acting. It wasn't just a dream, it was survival. As a child, he found solace in the stories his mother told, in the scripts his stepfather taught, and in the moments he spent on stage. Acting was where he could express everything he felt but couldn't say. It gave him a sense of purpose, control, and belonging. But as much as he loved it, his dream of becoming an actor felt impossible at times, especially considering his background. Vin Diesel, born Mark Sinclair, had always been told that he didn't fit in. He wasn't white enough to play white roles, nor was he black enough to play black roles. His ethnic ambiguity became an obstacle rather than a strength in an industry that was still figuring out how to embrace diversity. Growing up in New York, Vin had never really thought about race in the way Hollywood expected him to. He was simply Mark, a kid trying to find his place in a tough world, but Hollywood wasn't interested in his identity as a person. They were interested in fitting him into a box, and that box didn't exist for him. As a young man faced a mountain of rejections, casting directors couldn't figure out what to do with him. He wasn't the typical leading man, and Hollywood didn't know where to place him. Time and time again, Vin found himself on the outside looking in, wondering why he didn't fit the mold of the usual Hollywood star. Rejection after rejection, doors kept closing. But instead of giving up, something inside him stirred. He wasn't going to wait around for someone to give him permission to exist in this industry. He was going to create his own path, no matter how unconventional it might be. At the time, he was working as a nightclub bouncer in Manhattan, spending his nights guarding doors and breaking up fights, all while struggling to make ends meet. His life was a far cry from the glamorous world of movies, but he kept his dream alive. He didn't give up on acting even when it seemed like the industry didn't want him. He took matters into his own hands. Rather than continue to wait for someone to offer him a role, he decided to create one for himself. With $3,000, 0 cents borrowed from friends, Vin bought a second-hand camera and set out to make a short film. It wasn't a big-budget production. It wasn't anything flashy. It was raw, gritty, and real. The film was called Multifacial, and it was his story. A story of an actor struggling to fit into the world of Hollywood, just as he had struggled to fit into the world. Vin wrote the script, directed it, acted in it, and even scored it himself. He poured every ounce of his frustration, pain, and ambition into that film. It was a labor of love, a final attempt to prove that he belonged in this industry. When Multifacial was finished, Vin was broke. He didn't have an agent, no major studio backing him, and no expectations of success. But fate has a funny way of working sometimes. The film got an invitation to the Cannes Film Festival in 1995. It wasn't the red carpet kind of event that stars dream of. Vin didn't have a tuxedo, he didn't have an agent, and he certainly didn't walk down a glamorous carpet. Instead, he walked the streets of Cannes, watching his film play on a French screen, his heart racing with hope. Somewhere in that crowd, Steven Spielberg was watching. Spielberg, the legendary director who had shaped so many careers, was captivated by what he saw. It was Multifacial, Vin's raw, imperfect film that spoke to something universal about identity and belonging. Spielberg saw the potential in Vin, the fire that burned beneath the surface. He didn't just see a struggling actor, he saw someone with depth, someone with the resilience and raw talent that could take on the world. That one moment of recognition changed everything for Vin. Spielberg called Vin and offered him a role in Saving Private Ryan, 1998, a film that would change his life forever. The man who had spent years fighting for a chance now found himself standing alongside Tom Hanks on a battlefield in France, with one of the most renowned directors in Hollywood behind the camera. That was Vin's breakthrough, his first major role in a big-budget film. The opportunity had come not because someone saw him as the perfect fit for a part, but because he had built his own path and refused to wait for permission. But even after landing a role in Saving Private Ryan, the road ahead wasn't smooth. Hollywood still didn't fully know what to do with him. It wasn't until Pitch Black, 2000, a sci-fi film where Vin played the character of Riddick, that he truly began to cement his place in Hollywood. That role catapulted him to stardom, but even then, the journey was far from over. He had to prove himself again and again, showing the world that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder, but a force to be reckoned with. And that's exactly what he did. The Fast and the Furious franchise in 2001 solidified Vin's place as an action icon. The film, which started as a modest production, quickly became a massive global hit. It turned Vin Diesel into a household name and made him the face of a billion-dollar franchise. But the road to that success had been long and uncertain. Vin had fought to make a name for himself in an industry that told him he didn't belong. Yet, With his talent, determination, and resilience, he built his own path to the top. Through every rejection, every closed door, and every obstacle, Vin Diesel never stopped pushing forward. He didn't wait for Hollywood to figure him out. He didn't wait for someone to offer him the perfect role. He simply took what he had, worked with what he knew, and built a career from scratch. In the end, his story wasn't just one of fame and fortune. It was a story of resilience, of fighting through adversity, and of never giving up on yourself, no matter how many times the world tells you that you don't fit. Vin Diesel didn't just survive the rejection, he thrived, because he built his own path. And that path took him to places he had once only dreamed of. Fame, family, and personal loss are intertwined in Vin Diesel's life in ways that few outside the Hollywood spotlight can truly understand. To the world, Vin Diesel is the tough, fearless action hero. Dominic Toretto in Fast and Furious, Riddick in Pitch Black, Xander Cage in XXX. He's the man who survived car chases, explosions, and epic battles on screen. But beneath the muscles and the adrenaline-pumping action scenes lies a man who's been deeply shaped by the people he loves and the personal losses that have shaken him to his core. Vin's rise to fame was swift but not without its struggles. After years of fighting for a place in the industry, he found his breakthrough role in Pitch Black in 2000. But it was the Fast and the Furious that truly solidified his place as an action icon. When the film debuted in 2001, no one expected it to be the global phenomenon it became. A film about street racing, loyalty, and family resonated with millions of people worldwide. Vin's portrayal of Dominic Toretto, a man driven by loyalty and the bonds of family, struck a chord with audiences. It wasn't just the fast cars and high-octane action that captivated people. It was the theme of family and how it transcends everything that made the film feel real. In the years following The Fast and the Furious, Vin's career took off. He was no longer just a struggling actor fighting for a role. He had become one of Hollywood's leading men. Yet, despite his growing fame and success, the pressures of the industry were never far behind. The world saw Vin Diesel as an action star, but what they didn't see were the quiet moments of struggle he faced behind closed doors. Fame was not the freedom that many imagine it to be. It came with its own set of chains, its own weight to bear. The demands of Hollywood, the expectation to be constantly on top, and the pressure to always perform took a toll on Vin, both physically and emotionally. Yet, in the midst of it all, he kept a strong focus on the people who mattered most to him, his family. Vin's family, especially his close knit relationship with his mother, Delora, and his stepfather, Irving, played a crucial role in keeping him grounded. They were the people who loved him before fame came into the picture. The people who knew him not as Vin Diesel the movie star, but as Mark Sinclair, the quiet, hardworking kid from New York. His family was always there to remind him of who he really was, even when the world began to treat him like a myth. In the hustle of shooting films and promoting his projects, Vin never lost sight of the importance of family. It was in his upbringing, surrounded by people who cared for him deeply, that he learned the value of loyalty, love, and support. But no matter how much fame surrounded him, personal loss came calling at the most unexpected moments. One of the most painful moments in Vin's life was the tragic death of his dear friend and Fast and Furious co-star Paul Walker in 2013. Paul wasn't just a colleague to Vin. He was a brother. Their bond went beyond the silver screen. They had spent years together on the set of the Fast and Furious franchise, sharing jokes, experiences, and building a genuine brotherhood. The two of them had weathered the storm of Hollywood's ups and downs together, and their friendship had only grown stronger over time. But in a moment that no one could have predicted, Paul was gone. He died in a car crash during a break from filming Furious 7. Vin was left to process the grief of losing someone who had become family, and the loss was overwhelming. For weeks after Paul's death, Vin locked himself away in silence. The man who had always been the picture of strength and resilience found himself broken, unable to do anything but grieve. The film's production was put on hold, and the cast and crew were given time to mourn. Vin had to find the strength to return to the set and finish the film. But it wasn't just about making a movie. It was about honoring his friend's memory. Furious 7 became more than just a film. It was a tribute to Paul Walker. The final scenes of the movie, where Paul's character, Brian, drives off into the sunset, were a deeply emotional moment for Vin, who had lost a brother in real life. As the camera rolled, Vin's voice cracked with emotion as he drove alongside his friend, knowing that it was the last time they would share the screen together. When Furious 7 was released in 2015, it became one of the highest-grossing films in history, earning over $1,500,000,000 worldwide. But for Vin, the success of the film didn't feel like a victory. He sat in silence through the premiere, watching himself and Paul's characters say goodbye to one another on screen. It wasn't acting for him, it was real. It was a farewell to a friend he would never see again. In that moment, Vin realized that fame and success were hollow without the people you love. It was the people who mattered most in life, not the accolades or the applause. And Paul, who had taught him so much about living in the moment and slowing down, would never be there again to share it with him. The loss of Paul Walker changed Vin in ways he couldn't have predicted. It deepened his sense of what really mattered in life: family. He became more focused on his loved ones, more determined to be present for them. His relationship with his family took on a new level of importance. After years of chasing success and working tirelessly, he realized that the most valuable things in life were the quiet moments with the people he cared about. This shift in perspective also affected his approach to fatherhood. In 2008, he became a father to his first daughter, Hannah Riley, with his partner, Paloma Jimenez. Vin, who had been so consumed by his career in the past, made a vow to himself that he would never again let his work get in the way of being a present father. Vin's relationship with Paloma was also a key part of his journey. Despite his fame and the whirlwind of his Hollywood career, she grounded him. Paloma, a Mexican model, wasn't interested in the limelight. She didn't see Vin as a movie star. She saw him as Mark, the man she loved. Together, they built a family, raising 3 children and finding peace in the quiet moments at home. Even with the cameras flashing and the world watching, Vin learned that true happiness didn't come from the red carpets or the spotlight. It came from being with the people who made him feel whole. But the pressure of fame never truly goes away, and as the Fast and Furious franchise grew larger and more successful, so did the demands on his time. The filming schedules became more intense, and the time spent away from home began to weigh on him. The quiet moments with Paloma and his children became rarer. And Vin found himself torn between his commitment to his family and his obligation to his career. As time went on, Vin realized that the life he had built, his fame, his career, his wealth, wasn't enough if it meant sacrificing his connection to the people he loved. He began to set boundaries, making sure he was present for the important moments in his children's lives. He even included a clause in his contracts that ensured he wouldn't film on his children's birthdays. For Vin, family was no longer just a priority, it was everything. It was what had kept him going when he didn't think he could survive another day of rejection. It was the foundation that supported him through the storm of fame, loss, and personal struggle. But personal loss wasn't the only challenge Vin faced. The darker side of fame came with its own set of pressures. There were the constant headlines, the public scrutiny, and the personal conflicts that sometimes arose on set. His relationship with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson became a highly publicized issue during the filming of The Fate of the Furious in 2016, when Johnson posted a cryptic message calling some male co-stars candy asses. The tension between the two actors led to Johnson stepping away from the main saga, spinning off into Hobbs and Shaw. The media made it a battle of egos, but for Vin, it was just another reminder of the weight fame brought with it. Yet through all the public clashes and private struggles, Vin kept going, always placing loyalty, family, and resilience at the center of his life. Through fame, family, and personal loss, Vin Diesel has remained a symbol of endurance. The scars he carries, both physical and emotional, tell the story of a man who's been through hell and back. He's faced the darkest moments of loss and pain, but he's come out on the other side with a deeper understanding of what truly matters in life. Fame has come and gone, but the love of family, the bond of loyalty, and the lessons learned from loss are what have defined him. In the end, it wasn't the action scenes, the fame, or the multi-million-dollar franchises that made Vin Diesel who he is today. It's the people he's loved and lost, and the family he's built from the ashes of his own struggle. Success, in Vin Diesel's life, came with a heavy cost. From the outside, it looked like everything he had ever dreamed of. Fame, money, the kind of success that most people would do anything to achieve. But what the world didn't see was the toll it took on him, both physically and mentally. The very thing that made him a star, the action-packed films that brought him worldwide recognition, also wore him down. His body, once a symbol of strength, became a silent reminder of the sacrifices he made to reach the top. For years, Vin threw himself into his roles, pushing his body to its limits. There were no stunt doubles for him. He did it all himself, throwing punches, jumping from cars, and sprinting through explosions. He trained like a soldier, preparing for war, not knowing that the cost of that relentless dedication would one day catch up to him. Injuries piled up, torn tendons, strained wrists, and knees that ached with every step. But Vin never stopped. He showed up to set, even when his body screamed in pain, because he felt the weight of the responsibility. He had a job to do, and nothing was going to stand in his way. But over time, the pain became impossible to ignore. His joints rebelled, his spine began to crack, and the constant wear on his body started to threaten his ability to move freely. Doctors warned him that if he didn't slow down, he could lose his mobility within a decade. But slowing down wasn't something Vin knew how to do. For years, he had chased perfection in every role, in every scene, always pushing for more, always giving everything he had. But eventually, even the strongest engine runs out of fuel. It was then that Vin started to reassess what truly mattered. Fame had given him everything he had ever wanted. Everything, except peace. Success had come at a price, and he realized that the pursuit of it had led him away from what was most important: his health, his family, and his own well-being. The man who had once trained to be a machine now turned to yoga, meditation, and a more balanced approach to life. His focus shifted from the pursuit of perfection to finding peace, to taking care of himself, both mentally and physically. It was a slow process, but it was one that helped him find the balance he had long been searching for. In the end, Vin Diesel learned that success wasn't just about fame or fortune. It was about finding peace amidst the chaos, and realizing that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from what we can endure, but from what we can let go of.